I'm so glad you're feeling better, I told her. You should have called me to let me know you felt well enough to come tonight. I guess I wasn't sure until the last minute, Michael. Besides, I figured you'd be here with your new girlfriend, and I didn't want to bother you. Just then, Rhiannon walked by, laughing and talking with one of my teammates. And I see that I was right, Penny went on with a scowl on her face. She started to walk away, but I grabbed her arm again. Wait, Penny, we need to talk about our next match. She hesitated and then apparently made a decision. About that, Michael, things have gotten really busy for me lately, and well, I've decided to drop mixed doubles and just focus on the women's team. I was shocked. You can't do that, Penny, I blurted out. You're my partner. Who will I find to play with? Penny looked over my shoulder, and when I looked around, I saw Rhiannon standing there. You'll find somebody, Michael, Penny said. Now, please let me go. I need to get this food out. When I released her arm, she darted away. Rhiannon took my hand and walked with me toward a vacant table. Once we were seated, she leaned over and whispered, "Just so you know, that girl is in love with you." What? No, that's crazy. She's my tennis partner. She was in Melanie's Pilates course. And if I'm not mistaken, Rhiannon went on, ignoring me, you might just be a little in love with her too. No, I protested. You're way off base on that. She's just a good friend. Maybe, she said skeptically. In any case, I think we've done all we can for tonight, so let's get out of here. When we got back to my house, I asked Rhiannon to fill me in on what had transpired with Melanie and Frank. If you're enjoying my content, consider joining my Patreon community. By becoming a patron, you'll get access to full parts of my videos much earlier than everyone else. Plus, you'll be supporting me to create even more awesome content for you. Check out the link in the description to join now. She gave me a smug little smile. I wandered over to where they had their food laid out and sampled it, making complimentary remarks. Melanie obviously didn't appreciate my being there, but there wasn't much she could say. Then I told her how much I liked her outfit, and she was forced to return the compliment. That gave me a chance to tell her where I bought it. I could tell she recognized the clothes and knew how much the outfit must have cost. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were almost green with envy. That sounds like Melanie, I said. She's definitely into fashion and prides herself on her taste in clothing. Just then, Rhiannon continued, one of the other ladies asked Melanie for her help in the kitchen, and though she didn't want to, she had to leave me alone with Frank. Once she was gone, I reached over and tried another sample of their dish. As she spoke, Rhiannon reenacted what she had done. She bent over at the waist and her blouse fell away, revealing her chest barely restrained by a flimsy bra. Then she made a little scooping motion with her finger, stuck it in her mouth, and, staring at me all the while, on it so lasciviously that I could feel the heat. She straightened up and grinned at me, clearly aware of the impact she'd made. Once I had Frank's attention, I began to flirt with him in earnest. I asked him if he'd played football, and that gave him a chance to boast a little. While he was doing that, I reached over and rubbed his chest. I commented on how much bigger he is than you, and I told him I liked big men. She snickered. I thought he was going to see right there at the table. Wow, I said. No wonder Melanie was so hostile. I do what I can, she said with obvious false modesty. And I can't believe that Frank would believe you were on to him, I added. She laughed derisively. Guys like Frank are so full of themselves that it would never occur to them to question a woman's interest. What's so ironic is that they're usually the worst lovers. I had to grin at that. If what Rhiannon said was true, it would serve Melanie right. I handed her her envelope. Do you think we're ready for the next stage? I asked her. Definitely. Your club's dance will be perfect for what we've got planned. Then she turned and headed for the front door. What? No attempted seduction tonight? I asked her with a smile. She grinned back at me over her shoulder. I wouldn't think of it. Then she turned and gave a little twitch of her hips that sent a jolt through my loins. After she'd gone, I opened a can of beer and sat down to think about what was happening. On the one hand, I felt really good about how well the honey trap was working. Even though Melanie didn't want me anymore, I knew that she was less than happy about how quickly I'd found someone to replace her, and even more discomfited because her replacement was way hotter than Melanie would ever be. All that was really gratifying, Yet I couldn't help feeling down about the situation with Penny. Could Rhiannon have been right? I wondered, could I really have feelings for Penny? I'd liked her right from the first time Melanie had introduced us. Likewise, I'd found her attractive, slim, athletic, and graceful, with an engaging, outgoing personality. But I'd always been careful to keep our relationship strictly as friends and tennis partners because of Melanie. And I'd been sure that that was the way Penny wanted it too, especially while she was getting over the loss of her husband. I thought about what Rhiannon had said about Penny. That couldn't be true, could it? If Penny was interested in me, why was she avoiding me like the plague? And why did that bother me so much? For that matter, why had I repeatedly turned down the hottest woman I was likely ever to meet in my life? Could my feelings for Penny be a part of that? Finally, I gave up and went to bed. I didn't know the answers to my questions, and even if I had, I still wouldn't have known what to do about them. I decided that the best thing for me was to stay the course, keeping focused on the plan I'd set in motion. The annual spring dance at the club was a popular event that always drew a large crowd. The ladies used the dance as an occasion to dress up, and the men grudgingly wore their sports coat. Some even donned ties. I was counting on Frank and Marlene to make an appearance. I'd clued Rhiannon in on what to expect, and I was curious to see what she'd be wearing for the climax of our plan tonight. So I was surprised and disappointed to see her get out of her car wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Admittedly, they were the tightest jeans I'd ever seen on a woman, and the t-shirt clung loosely to her braless chest. But I had still expected something different. My face must have given me away because she patted it as she brushed by me. "You didn't think I was going to risk my dress driving over here, did you? Just let me use your bedroom for a little while, and then I'll be ready to go." I had already put on my sports coat and slacks, so I puttered around impatiently in the den while she got dressed. Damn, I chuckled to myself. It's almost like we're an old married couple. After a few minutes, her voice came floating out to me. "Michael, can you come in here? I need your help with something." I walked back and opened the door to the bedroom. Oh my lord. Rhiannon was standing there in the sexiest underwear I'd ever seen. Her stockings were the same deep brown color, and they were held up by a garter belt that drew further attention to her most intimate parts. She made a half step in her stilettos and twirled around. She turned back to face me. "Will I do?" she asked with a little smile. I couldn't help myself. I took a step toward her, but she stopped me with a smile and an upraised hand. No, not now. I can't afford to have you mess this up. So now that I have your approval, get out of here and let me put my dress on." I think I staggered walking back out to the den. A few minutes later, she emerged. This time, she was wearing a strapless dress that was the same off-white color as the trim on her lingerie. The color contrasted perfectly with her hair. As she walked across the floor, I realized that the dress must have been custom-made for her because the fabric seemed to flow over her limbs like water. I could clearly see the definition of her thighs with every step, and when she turned, her buttocks flexed in clear detail. The slit in the side of the dress came up to just below her stocking top, and when she stood the right way, her perfect leg was revealed to devastating effect. Of course, it didn't help my blood pressure that I knew exactly what she was wearing underneath her gown. I swallowed hard. "I think you may cause some heart attacks tonight," I told her, and I wasn't being facetious. She simply smiled at me and extended her arm so that I could escort her out the door. For the dance, the patio area at the club had been cleared and paper lanterns had been strung overhead. It was kind of cheesy, but I found myself enjoying the effect of the soft light and tinkling music. Rhiannon slipped into my arms to dance, and I was not surprised to find that she was a far better dancer than I. As we moved together, she rested her head on my shoulder, and at that moment I decided I didn't care if she was a working girl. I just enjoyed the feeling of her body against mine and the pleasure of her company. She raised her head and pulled back far enough to look at me. "You know, this suburban living isn't so bad. A girl could get used to it." Before I could respond, she stiffened. "Oh, battle stations." I turned in time to see Frank Calhoun headed our way, dragging an obviously reluctant Melanie with him. "Hello, Rhiannon, hello, Michael," he boomed out. "So glad you decided to join us this evening. How about switching partners for a dance or two?" When I acceded, he whirled Rhiannon away, leaving me and an obviously uncomfortable Melanie standing there. I held out my arms to her. Care for a dance, for old time's sake? She reluctantly agreed, and as a new song started to play, I began to dance with her. It was an interesting experience. I'd loved this woman and been married to her for 10 years. Yet after what had happened, the only thing left in me was an intense desire to make her feel what she'd done to me. So was our marriage really that bad? I asked. She sighed. No, Michael, it wasn't like that at all. We had some good years and some good times. But then things settled down into a routine, and after a while, I just didn't feel very excited about our relationship anymore. When Frank came along and made it so obvious how much he wanted me, I just got swept up in it all. I really fell hard, Michael. It felt just like when I was back in college. She looked up at me. I didn't want to hurt you, Michael, but I had to do what was right for me. Can you understand that? I understand, I said bitterly. You decided to trade up. I didn't mean it like that, she said defensively. That's okay, I said. I've traded up too. She winced, remembering who I was dating now, and I felt a measure of gratification. If everything went right later, that was only going to get better. I looked up to see Frank and Rhiannon walking toward us arm in arm. Here's your date back, Michael, Frank said with a little smirk. Have a nice night. Then he walked away with Melanie struggling to catch up. Rhiannon and I resumed dancing. How did it go? I whispered in her ear. I could almost hear the grin in her voice. The hook is well and truly set, she said. He's convinced that I've got the hots for him. He's going to make some excuse to Melanie, and we're going to meet back at the clubhouse after everyone has left. I'm just a little nervous about that part. The timing is going to have to be perfect, I told her. You just leave that to me. Women know all about such things. Then she licked my ear, and I shuddered helplessly. As the night went on, I noticed that the people were beginning to thin out pretty quickly. I guess I must have been looking around, because Rhiannon caught me. Sorry, Michael, she said. I don't think Penny came tonight. Am I that transparent? I asked her. Like glass, she said with a little smile. When we got back to my house, I reached in my pocket and handed Rhiannon another envelope. I may not get a chance to give you this later, I told her, and I wanted to make sure you got it okay. She took it almost reluctantly, I thought. She looked at me for a moment, and then her face changed. The sexual goddess somehow disappeared, leaving a real, albeit still beautiful woman. This has been the most unusual assignment I've ever had, she said, and you're unlike any client I've ever had. It's been a little frustrating at times, I blushed, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I took both her hands in mine. When I set out to get revenge, I knew I needed someone with remarkable attributes, I replied. But I never expected I would find someone like you, and I'll never forget you. I stepped forward suddenly and kissed her on the lips. She held it for a few seconds, and then stepped back abruptly. She blinked her eyes rapidly several times and then said hastily, "Mustn't mess up my lipstick?" Then she glanced down at the jewel-encrusted watch around her wrist and added, "It's almost time. We need to get going. Give me exactly 30 minutes. With that, she went out the door, got in her car, and drove away.